Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's show, I'm thrilled to be joined by Khobi Price, the beat writer for the Southern California News Group, also hosts a weekly insider show covering the Lakers on Bleacher Report. Khobi, four-time guest. How you doing today? How you feeling?
I feel like the four horsemen. That's how I feel. That's how I'm feeling right now. Because I'm a four-time guest.
We're setting a record here for Off the Rails, less than 40 seconts in, and it is glorious.
Am I the first four-time guest? I know when I was
believe
third
so.
time.
You and Sam, I believe, are the You're the first four-time. So make of that what you will.
It's on Sam. It's all on Sam.
Yeah, I think you've upgraded the visuals. Everything is trending up.
We're trending upwards these days.
What's not trending up right now, but we'll see in game two, is the Lakers. So Lakers dropped game one, 117-95. Looking back at game one, what is your top line takeaway or takeaways? What stood out? And what do you think is sustainable or not sustainable from what we saw on Saturday night?
When I was rewatching the game, felt it live, but also like rewatching it. The one thing that really stood out to me was just how much Minnesota was getting out of transition. And especially early on, like during that, I think it was 26-6 run in the second quarter. It felt like for the Lakers, a lot of there's two plays that come to my mind immediately. There was one where I think it may have been LeBron was trying to drive on Naz Reid and he got stripped, blocked, like whatever you want to call it, like the turnover, block, whatever it is. Minnesota's off to the races. I think they get a Dante DiVincenzo layup out of it. Next play, LeBron goes on Rudy, gets blocked at the rim. I think it was a Conley three or a corner three on the ensuing play. And a lot of I think I asked Austin about this, or I think maybe you did. I don't remember. But there were just a lot of plays that the Lakers left at the rim that Minnesota just felt like they were just running, even off of makes. When the Lakers were able to convert, it felt like Minnesota is prioritized. Like these guys, obviously they struggle in transition, period. If they're missing layups or if they're missing shots close to the basket, we have even more of an advantage. So that was one of the things that I felt like it's sustainable for Minnesota in the sense of the Lakers are poor they've just struggled with transition defense for years now. They've had their ups and downs, but that felt like it was present. What isn't, I guess, sustainable is the Lakers shooting as poorly inside the paint, especially in that first half. I think they went 5 for 15 inside the paint in the first half for 10 paint points. Like that's one of those things where if LeBron's able, and it's not just LeBron, Austin missed a couple easy bunnies as well. So if they're able to convert just a few more of those, maybe you're able to keep Minnesota out of transition a little bit more or less, depending on who's you're speaking for, and then you can establish your defense. There's a whole lot that didn't go right, but if you had to pinpoint, all right, if you take care of this one thing, this could help that. We could talk. I didn't even get to the offense and how they seem discombobulated, but that's just one thing that I was just get some layups to go, get some floaters to go, and that should just help overall, and then keep them out of rhythm, keep Minnesota out of rhythm.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's a really big swing factor here that we saw. 25-6 in fast break points, and I don't even think that was really reflective of actual fast break points in this game because of the archaic way it is tracked. It was probably closer to 35, 40 points in transition. And maybe LA also had more than 6, but still there was a clear discrepancy there of around 20 points or so, which if LA is losing that, they're also losing the offensive rebounding battle. They're losing points in the paint, 3-point battle, all that stuff that's why Minnesota won game one by 22 points. I think from a sustainability perspective, the things that the Lakers are going to have to overcome is just the Wolves' size and physicality. That's not going to change moving forward. And I think we had seen the Lakers navigate that better in previous matchups against bigger front courts. Looking at OKC, Houston, Memphis, Dallas in recent weeks, like they had fared well and dictated the terms of engagement. So I think they can fare better, but it was just like up and down looking at a lot of the one-on-one matchups just from a physicality perspective. Minnesota was able to just win those. Like what's not sustainable, I would say, is obviously Minnesota's shooting, but I think the Lakers made several game plan errors and just a lot of self-inflicted wounds defensively in terms of helping off when they didn't need to, over helping, over rotating. There were just a lot of basic things that I think in part are bad habits that they've accumulated as they've had this defensive shift starting in January of helping off certain guys and maybe protecting the paint at the cost of giving up open threes. So that is a balance that they're going to have to strike better moving forward, starting in the first half of game 2. But I think if they can do what you said in terms of being better with their finishing, but also getting back in transition and not letting that discrepancy be as large as it was. And then also, I think just playing harder and playing more physically and just getting more than 10 fouls and not picking up their first foul like early into the second quarter. Like they gotta like
it was late.
Excuse me.
It was like 4 minutes left in the second quarter. That's they got when they picked up their first foul. It was like
you're right.
4:30.
So like that is emblematic of just the lack of physicality. And even if you want to say the Lakers got the benefit of the whistle defensively, sometimes like that is just nuts to go almost 20 minutes, 19 minutes without picking up a foul. So they have to hit back and hit harder than the Wolves did in game 1. So looking kind of ahead to the rest of the series right now, there's as I mentioned, like a lot of panic right now. Laker fans are in their feelings, understandably, about the game 1 result. But how concerned are you based on this game 1 and like in terms of just the implications for the rest of this series? Like, did it change your perspective at all in the series, or did you just chalk it up to like bad game 1? A lot went against the Lakers, a lot went right for Minnesota.
I'm not too concerned in terms of the Lakers' ability to advance out of this round, just because I think we even talked about it pregame, or I remember talking to other people about like I kind of expected Minnesota to really put their foot on this game, just from the standpoint of sometimes just get a feeling this felt like a game like the Lakers haven't always been the best team coming off of X amount of days of rest, and sure the Timberwolves are going through it as well, but every team responds to those situations differently, and Minnesota really showcased the advantages that we already knew that they had. So it wasn't anything glaring from the standpoint of, oh, snap, I didn't realize Minnesota had it like that. And it's also one of those, if you're letting the team get out in transition as much as you did, and you're letting them get those kind of open looks in transition, then like, yes, shooting 21 of 42, that's not a sustainable model from beyond the arc. However, if you give them practice shot after practice shot, then they're going to knock down more than you expect. They're going to knock down, 38, 39, 40 plus on a regular basis. So I'm not too concerned. I think there are a lot of, you mentioned the overhelping. There were a couple times where I just thought there was needless help, like unnecessary helping, like guys digging, one pass away, and the guy that they're on is a shooter. It's one of those, you don't need to do that. Like you wouldn't, even if it was a non-shooter, you may not even need to do that anyway or want to do that. So I'm from concern, not too much. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it later in the show or at some point, but clean up some of the mental mistakes. Offensively, I think JJ even spoke about it. They expected different coverages in pick and rolls involving Luka. I'm sure we'll get into that. We can get more detail into that. But that's just one of those, like, now you've seen it. You have an idea of what they're going to do defensively. When it's a Luka ball screen, whether it's Jaxson, Rui, Dorian, LeBron, like you have film. You can adapt to it. You've had a couple of days, or they'll have a couple of days by tomorrow night's game. So not too concerned, but it's also one of those. It is still, it's the best of 4 or best 2-4 or first to 4. And you're already down 1, so now you have to win at least 4 of the next 6. So it's not the ideal position to be in, but I feel like I don't feel any differently about the series after that game.
To be honest, I'm a little concerned. I'm not going to lie. Like I think the size and the length and the physicality were there was a bigger gap there than anticipated. Like, I think that's going to be a bigger factor, in my opinion, for the Lakers to overcome than I anticipated, right? So I'm not saying they can't, and I said after the game that I changed my prediction from Lakers in 6 to Lakers in 7. I think it's going to be a little bit of a tougher series for them, but I still would pick them to come out of it. You referenced it, like we talked about it before the game. I thought the Lakers were going to lose. Like I just got this weird intuition feeling entering the game that it just something felt off energetically, and I was like, it just kind of feels like they're going to lose tonight. I don't know why. But then what, like actually seeing it happen and the manner in which it happened, like I don't think the Wolves are going to shoot like that again. But I also think my actual biggest concern coming out of the game was more so the Lakers' inability to contain the ball. And it was like Ant 8 for 22, was 1 for 7 at the rim. I thought he got fouled on multiple shots at the rim that just weren't called for whatever reason. So that easily could have been like 1 for 5, 1 for 4 with him going to the free throw line 2 or 3 times. And then that also changed it. Like now we're talking about maybe 8 for 19 with some more free throws and a little bit of a different performance, but like that went how it went. So whatever, 8 for 22, but 9 assists and just 1 turnover. And the turnover came a minute 15 into the game. So like Lakers blitzed him. He felt the pressure. He threw it out of bounds, made a tough play. And then from that point on, 9 assists to 0 turnovers for the final 46 minutes and 45 seconds. So like he played a masterful game from an execution and like reading the game perspective. And I just felt like the Lakers both, they could not contain him at the point of attack. He got downhill a lot. Now they're zoning up and the shifting and the rotations were on point from like containing Ant and forcing him into some tough middies or misses at the rim. But then when he was still able to get downhill and then create those either kick out passes or then, kind of the hockey assist, getting the Lakers in rotation, that's where I think he just picked them apart. So that to me is like, I don't see Rui or Austin or DFS all of a sudden becoming some like elite all defense type of point of attack guy. So whether they change the defense against Ant and play him more straight up, or they continue kind of with this general approach, I still think he's going to almost be able to get downhill at will. And then the Lakers kind of have to figure out a better way to negotiate the helping versus the staying at home. And like, I think that's a pretty tough thing to figure out.
So something you mentioned earlier, I think that kind of actually ties into all of this. I was looking up while you were speaking because I couldn't remember the number. How much of the physicality and just presentation rather, from Minnesota's side has something to do with the fact that Jaxson only played 8 minutes? Like, I mean, so there are 40 minutes where they're playing without a center. Like that, those 40 minutes you're playing with. I mean, actually, probably not 40 because the last however many was
3 minutes.
Time.
So it was 37 out of 45 minutes they played without a center.
Yeah, Alex Len played 3. Jaxson Hayes played 8. So So 37 minutes you're playing. Your tallest player on the floor is either Jared Vanderbilt, LeBron James, or Rui Hachimura. That's part of, and this is something that we talked about. I know you talked about on your show and wrote about rather. The small ball is an advantage for the Lakers, but if you're going to play small ball for 35 plus minutes or having centerless lineups for 30 plus minutes, then that's going to just only enhance Minnesota's size advantage. And I think that's only going to make it more present or greater felt when you're playing. Like to me, that's a maybe 20 to 25, but you need Jaxson to be able to play. I mean, forget double digits, maybe more like 20 minutes, 20 to 25. Like ideally, him playing 8. I mean, to me, it's not just about Jaxson in the sense of like how good he is or isn't. You're just giving Minnesota almost the same looks in terms of just your defensive profile. And obviously, you can switch things up. You can hedge. You can blitz. You can switch. You can change things up within that, but I think Jaden McDaniels said it. Like, if you're playing these centerless lineups, he's going to be the tallest guy on the floor if it's not Rudy or Nas. As it comes to, I think that's a big factor. Like Jaxson didn't only play 8 minutes because of the Lakers' preference to play small ball. Like part of that was his own performance, and then you get pulled. But he needs to have. They need to be able to play bigger for longer, but he also needs to be better for that to happen. So they can. So their size and presentation can just be better throughout the game, and so they're not going through these lulls. Because the other part of it is playing those centerless lineups is taxing. We saw it during the season and kind of the ebbs and flows energy wise. And yes, it's just one game, but it's that would be the main concern to me, at least coming out of game one, is that if Jackson's not able to play a significant amount of minutes, then you're just you're basically centerless for. I mean, that's 3/4 of the game. As for the Ant point, I agree. I didn't mind. I don't mind them giving. I mean, they do it against they've done it against pretty much all of the top guards, whether it's Shea, whether it's Jalen Brunson, just how they help, especially on ISOs from the wings, and kind of bringing that early help over to deter drives, force those contested looks. I don't think Minnesota did a great job in terms of countering that. The Lakers had a great, not great. They did the same thing in the last matchup in February, and it seemed like Minnesota was okay with against countering that. I just also think the Lakers after the pass out of it, they just didn't execute as well after the pass. And I think that again, you have to be sharper. I think it's one of those. It's hard for me to judge how good or how effective or ineffective this game plan is if you're just not approaching it in the most sharp way.
Well, that's a point of it. Like I agree. I think the initial line of defense in terms of helping on those like I think the point of attack, in my opinion, was bad. I thought they got beat, just simple. And Ant is an elite athlete at a different level than anyone on the Lakers defensively, outside of maybe Vando. Obviously, he's more explosive and has more of a burst than Vando. But I would also like to see Vando on him more. And you mentioned Jaxson. I have it here in my show notes. I think those two guys combined for 22 minutes. I would like to see them probably play 35 minutes combined, at least, maybe even closer to 40 combined, but between those two. But I think 22 with having Jaxson as your only 7-footer in the rotation, your only real center. I think he has regressed a bit over the past month or so, but did show real growth as a defensive rebounder and as a rim protector throughout the course of the season, especially in the second half of the season. Vando is your best per possession perimeter defender. And we saw the impact he had late in the third quarter, but that also coincided with Ant getting that cramp or calf injury, whatever it was. And then Vando came in and just started pressuring 94 feet and picking up as ball handlers were trying to initiate the offense. And I think he sensed no, Ant, let's just muck the game up and wreak havoc and just cause some chaos. And he did that. But I would like to see him also guard more Ant. And one thing you and I were talking about during the game was just how they match the minutes. I would like to see Vando out there a little bit more against Ant and deploy him against Ant and less. Ant has a major physical advantage against DFS, Rui, and Austin. He does not have a major physical advantage against Vando. He is quicker than Vando, but Vando is taller. He is longer. He is stronger. So he doesn't have. Sure, he might be able to beat him on that initial, just with his first step. But Vando can recover, Vando can chase from behind, and I just think he's a more physically imposing presence than any of the other Lakers options against Ant. And I know that with their style of defense, they're trying to dictate him to certain spots of the floor. But I think everyone struggled with kind of funneling him a certain way. There were several times where he just split, whether it was pick and roll coverages or just getting downhill and that low man around the box coming up to help. He also split it sometimes or was patient and then pivoted and got guys with a pump fake and then hit a little midi in the paint. So I think he did, all things considered, a solid job against that. But even if the Lakers were able to contain or corral that initial action, the second he kicked the ball out, reversed the ball, and the Wolves had the Lakers in rotation, that's where you saw like the Lakers just completely kind of like lose, like let go of the rope and just like not really know what to do. So I think it has to, defense has multiple efforts, and we saw it in multiple ways of, okay, you stop Ant, but then he reverses it and then they get an open three, or you actually play a really impressive possession and then you give up an offensive rebound. And it was just like, they didn't really know what they were doing. So I think from a game plan perspective, it could have been better, but more so from like an execution and just like awareness and intensity perspective, it could have been better. But to your point earlier, like you have Jaxson out there just playing 10 to 15 more minutes, and you have Vando out there a little bit more and deploying him on Ant, I think that helps make up for some of the physical disadvantages that they have, and it helps you match up with them. And Vando is going to be getting in the mix for rebounds, and Jackson's going to be there just being big and trying not to foul around the rim. But like, I just think they kind of need to lean more into their size, I think, than anything. And they're still going to be at a disadvantage, but I felt it was too much to overcome in game one.
Yeah, it was way too much. I mean, Jackson's their tallest player, and Vando's either their second tallest or third tallest, depending on him versus LeBron in terms of just height. Obviously, that's not accounting for like actual weight. But, I mean, Vando also just plays bigger than his position in certain ways. I mean, he's one of the best – you mentioned one of the best perimeter defenders, or the best perimeter defender possession by possession, best rebounder too. I mean, that's an important factor. I mean, that was something that really, after, it was funny how the game started because the Lakers were getting all the offensive rebounds, and then that just quickly went in Minnesota's favor. It was also, like, the more we talk about it, the more I'm reflecting on just how slow, like, there were a couple possessions where, I mean, there's one possession distinctly in my mind where, and this kind of, it was, the Lakers were winning, and I think they were still winning after this bucket, but it showed me the level of execution that just wasn't there. I think it was a Mike Conley, because I think it was Austin Gardner and Mike Conley, and Vando was on the floor at this point, so it must have been later in the first quarter. And I forget who he was guarding, maybe Naz Reid, but it was a pick and roll that they switched, and Mike Conley blew by Vando, not Anthony Edwards. And part of it wasn't just like, and just like blew by him and then kicked it out for, I think, with Jaden McDaniels 3. And it was jarring because I'm thinking, like, this, we're talking about Vando, and this isn't to pick on Vando. Like, he was, like you said, in the third quarter, he changed the game. He's had these moments throughout the season. But to me, it opened my eyes, because it's one of those, we're talking about you guarding Ant Edwards, and Mike Conley, again, off of pick and roll, or pick and pop, like, he just gets by him and gets the easy 3. But part of that to me was Vando wasn't high up enough for the switch. He was too low. He wasn't in the best position to switch. And next thing you know, like, that small detail is the difference between, Vando just being in front of Conley versus Conley, putting his 37-year-old burst into gear. And next thing you know, it's an easy 3 from Minnesota. So there's a lot that they could do better, or they can do they can switch their game plans up. They could do a lot. For me, I just come back to, you just have to execute what's being asked of you better, because if you don't, then I can't tell if I need to change it. And this is obviously like a thing that knows go back and forth between coaches and players all the time. But like, I watched that game, like, there were certain, at least I felt like there were more things offensively that need to be adjusted on the Lakers end than defensively. In terms of game plan, I felt like they were, intensity and physicality was lacking defensively, at least to start. But then that adjusted, and I thought their game plan was fine. I thought offensively their approach to attacking Minnesota was a little out of whack. And it's when it came to, JJ said it, they weren't getting a whole lot of blitzes or hedge, like 4 on the situations that would create 4 on the ball situations for the Lakers. How they attacked. I think we talked about this during the game. They were attacking their bigs a lot early and trying in terms of mismatch hunting or perceived mismatch hunting, and that just wasn't working. And then as the game went on, I felt like they were trying to, all right, let's get some of the smaller players involved. But even when, I think it was the second quarter, when they were getting some of those switches on the smaller guys, I didn't like how there were a couple of times where they're getting post-ups 20, 21 feet, or they're just doing pick and pops and they're getting guys, 20, 21 feet out, as opposed to get on the block, or get on the get to a post up, or how they ran their pick and pops if they were going to attack a big. I honestly, when I was rewatching it, some of it's like, I wish sometimes they would run, or not wish. I think it would be advantageous for them to run a pick and pop with an empty side pick and pop, as opposed to having someone in the corner, because then you can, that pop can be even wider. They can go pop all the way to the corner, and that just opens up space. That can open up more space depending on how you run it. Because even when they're running their pick and pops, it felt like the floor was still a little congested.
Yeah, I think too, you could also go a little bit deeper with the initial penetration there in terms of whether it's Luka or Austin, whoever's running the pick and pop there, like take that extra dribble, take that extra step toward the basket, and that creates a bit more distance. Because what it felt like to me was Rudy was able to, I thought like Luka got him a couple times, especially first possession draws a foul on him. And Luka just does what Luka does, and he loves torturing Rudy. But especially against LeBron and Austin, I thought he held his own for the most part. And like there were several possessions against pick and pop opportunities where he was able to stay big and retreat, but like be in a high enough drop to also corral the ball handler. But then when they kick the ball to the popper, then he was able to make up that ground and close out and at least stick his arm up and like be able to contest it or make them think twice about taking that shot. So there were some good pick and pop possessions that they got. And I think Rui missed a good look, but they were able to create and generate some high percentage looks. I just think that they have to be more intentional with the spacing. Like to your point, the offensive end was so bad that I felt like I'm more actually optimistic about them figuring out the offensive end in a weird way, because I'm like, there were so many things that they did just from a spacing perspective. Like we mentioned, part of the reason you don't play Jaxson and Vando more, I would argue from JJ's perspective, probably the primary reason you don't play those two guys more is the offensive end and the spacing concerns that those two guys can provide when they're out there. However, they got none of the benefits of not playing them, really. Like they were not able to generate a bunch of high quality 3-point looks. I mean, there were stretches where they did, but just the shot quality overall, the offensive organization, the ability to target mismatches, like they weren't getting to the ball in the post or in pick and roll. And I just think that they weren't creating enough advantages and getting Minnesota in the blender. And I think that has to be the primary thing going into game 2 is, as we discussed during the game, like how can we target Mike Conley more? How can we target Nah more? How can we target Dante DiVincenzo more? Those are the entry points into the Wolves defense, not Rudy Gobert, 4-time defensive player of the year, who I think holds up better on the perimeter than he's often given credit for, because he'll get crossed up, he'll get the big shot hit on him, and like Luka's maybe an exception where he just like does torture Rudy, and that's like its own kind of dynamic for whatever reason. But Luka aside, it's like Rudy can hold up in some of these switches against smaller players. And like I thought Naz Reid and Julius Randle held up largely fine and were able to corral guys and like force them to the help or even block them or alter shots on drives. So I don't think those are the guys you should be targeting. And maybe you get into a certain rhythm with your jumper, and that's where it's like, okay, I'm in a rhythm. I can target these guys, dance with them, create that separation, hit a shot. But I'm talking specifically about LeBron and Austin. They were not in a rhythm. And when they tried to target those guys, it just was leading to them not creating that separation, taking contested step back, pull up jumpers that they were able to hang with them on. And those guys just, I don't think made the offensive impact that the Lakers needed them to make. And so I think moving forward into game 2, I think they got to get Austin in motion a little bit more, and whether it's double drag or stack actions, like they got to create more openings for him. And then for LeBron, I think it has to be finding ways to get him closer to the basket, making those post-ups deeper, and then also finding ways to get a small on him. Because if he posts up against a small and he does the LeBron bully ball we've seen for decades at this point in the playoffs, Minnesota's going to have to help. And if it's a double or shading over, that's going to create an advantage for the Lakers and some weak side opportunities that LeBron could take advantage of. So I think that there's got to be like a re-examining of the offensive end that is almost so extreme that I think it will get better for me, honestly, some of the questions are like on the defensive end with what they do with Ant, what they do with the shooting. And this is a group that can put out a lasers lineup, as JJ likes to say, that like it's hard to help off of certain guys. And I thought Minnesota did a good job relocating and like knowing where the passing windows were. So I think some smart things from their part offensively. But for LA, it's got to be, how do we get LeBron and Austin going? And like, how do we create more advantages for them? Because if those guys are like, I thought Minnesota had 4 of the 5 best players on the floor throughout game 1. If that's going to happen, like this is going to be a short series and not in the way the Lakers want. So they got to find a way to get LeBron and Austin going.
Who were the 4?
I would say Ant, Jaden, Naz, and Julius, in my opinion, were 4 of the 5 best players on the floor.
Oh yeah, I was honestly curious.
You can even throw in Rudy. Like I thought Rudy didn't have the box score numbers, but like I thought Rudy was really impactful with his defense, his rebounding, and just being like that lob threat, rim finisher presence that like the Lakers had to pay attention to, and that kind of changed how they were defending things.
No, for sure. I was honestly just curious because I was thinking that you could, like to your point, I said you could have said they had 5 of the 6. And Rudy also
played, like I mean, everyone played well, really.
Yeah, and that's also if you're the Lakers, you're feeling like, Jaden McDaniels made all 3 of his threes. Like there was, Minnesota shot making was just on a different level, even with the quality of looks that they were getting. Like they were knocking them down at an absurd level. Like even if they shoot whatever, they shot 21. Like even if they shoot 17 of 42, like it could be a different game depending on when those threes came. Something you said that really stood out to me was that Minnesota is really, or at least based off game 1, they're really prioritizing not helping, staying out of the blender, staying out of situations where they have to make rotations. So I'm curious to see, to your point, there are opportunities. There were opportunities where they started the game with Conley on Rui. And I'm not saying that's going to, like, even if Rui, like, I would imagine for Minnesota, if they're going to post up Rui on Mike Conley, then they're just going to live with that because they're going to let that play out because that means the ball is not in Luka's hands or Austin's hands or LeBron's hands. But there are situations where you could get Mike Conley switch on to LeBron, to your point, or switch on to Luka, and you can go from there. But it seems like, at least based off of game 1, Minnesota's not going to give you those 4-on-3s or those help points easily. It's not going to come naturally like it would against other teams. Like Luka's may see more drop than he's seen all season long, or at least. And some of this may have been the screening. Some of this just may, again, to both of our points, where you set the screens and how the spacing is. But Rudy, at least with Luka, it seemed like there's a lot. He's up to touch at the level of the screen, and then he's dropping back, and McDaniels or whoever's guard is usually McDaniels, but whoever's guarding Luka's, it's on them to just navigate the screen and hustle back. But if you're 5 feet away instead of 7 feet away or 8 feet away, 9 feet away, that makes Rudy's job just that much easier. And even with Luka having, what did he have in the first quarter? 17, 14, 16, I believe. Yeah. Even with him having 16, the Minnesota was still like, bet. We're not sending 2 at the ball to you. We're gonna ride this out, and it worked. Luka still finished with 37, but the Lakers as a whole had 95. That's so. You live with that. You live with that. If I'm Minnesota, I have no reason to adjust by sending more defensive resources at Luka. I'm saying we not only did we get the win, but we got what we wanted. LeBron was out of rhythm for most of the game. Austin was out of rhythm for significant chunks, and Luka had 1 assist, and I feel good. Like if I'm Minnesota, I feel good. Like there's no reason for me to believe that I have to send 2 to the ball to Luka. At least not yet, unless the Lakers make an adjustment that requires that or facilitates that.
1 assist to 5 turnovers for Luka compared to 9 assists again, as I said earlier, and 1 turnover for Ant, and like that I think was a really big factor of just the health of the offense. Like the Lakers offense was not healthy, and it almost was, I think, intentional from Minnesota to kind of like, so we know Luka has the big first quarters, and I think their game plan was to stay home and to allow, if he's going to cook, just let him cook one-on-one or let like, we're not going to overreact to that. But it just in rewatching the first quarter, and I know Luka was asked about this after the game, and he seemed to be a little offended by the question, and I get it. But it was more so to me like it felt like they were running a lot through him, and basically every possession was ending with a Luka shot. And yes, like he was making a lot of them, and he dropped 16, and he had a really good first quarter, and the Lakers were up. But I think there is a rhythm element of just like how the offense is functioning, and it felt like the Lakers almost got out of their normal offensive habits, and it just became, well, if Luka is going to get one-on-one against anybody, we're going to spam this. And like it's understandable why they spammed it, and they had success with it. But I felt like, especially in that first quarter, no one else really got in a rhythm. Rui hit a couple threes, and then he was quiet the rest of the way. So I guess maybe he was the closest guy. But it was I mean, he scored 16 of their 28 points. It was a Luka heavy quarter, and then it just felt like from that point on, everyone was playing catch up. Austin didn't get his first bucket until early in the second quarter. LeBron didn't get his first bucket until early in the second quarter. That also came as Minnesota opened things up with a 26-6 run to just blow the game open and take control of it. So I think if I'm the Lakers, like, Luka can get his at any point against these guys. It's clear. Go back to the conference finals. Go back to just anytime he plays the Wolves. Like even Jaden, I thought did better, but Luka still got his against him. Like he can create the separation. Luka's Luka. But I think they need to find a way to get Austin to get going, to get LeBron to get going. And if they can get all three, or even just a couple of those guys, that's when you start to see Minnesota have to make some tougher decisions defensively, because it was pretty easy for them. It was like, we're just going to guard Luka a certain way, and we're staying home with everyone else, and we're not really afraid, and no one else is getting in a rhythm and forcing them to adjust. So if I'm the Lakers, I think my like first quarter strategy has to be, how can we get LeBron and Austin going more and force Minnesota to adjust defensively and exploit. If you're going to put Mike Conley on Rui, then we need to find ways to get Rui a deep seal, because even that first possession where Rui got the jumper against Conley, it was like a 14-foot contested jumper, which sure can be like a target practice jumper for Rui. We've seen him punish smaller guards before like that, but you should be getting a better look, I think, than like Rui getting pushed out by Mike Conley a little bit, catching it further than anticipated, and like just taking a turnaround contested jumper like that. That needs to be a better look. So I think they can. There's a lot of things they can do offensively. Again, defensively, I'm interested to see how they counter like the game one countering from Minnesota. I thought Minnesota did a better job progressively throughout the game countering some of the help. But so looking ahead to game two and just the rest of the series, like what are you looking toward? Where are some of the tactical battles that you find most interesting, based on what we saw in game one, and then some of the game two adjustments we've been talking about?
In terms of tactical battle, I'm not as concerned about it, but I am curious to see, to your point about how they defend Ant and where the help comes from. That's something I'm going to pay attention to, especially coming out of game one, where I think I wasn't as concerned about it, but I think, to your point, I guess also for me, it felt like in the moments early in the game, I felt like they did fine in terms of the help. But to your point, as the game went on, progressed, it just did not get better. If anything, like to your point, it only got worse. So I'm curious to see if they adjust in that way. I would caution about overcorrecting, because this is a Lakers team that was just switching a lot. And then, if it was an ISO situation, then they would shade help. They would show where the help was coming from. I do wonder about, if you start off, saying, all right, we're going to do our best to stay home. We're going to do our best to stay home, and we're not going to, if Ant has an ISO on, make up a defender. I'm not going to call a guy out or whoever, but if they have and then he blows by,
almost anybody.
Yeah, almost anybody. But I wonder if like sometimes you need that. I think this team benefits from helping early, because it helps their activity level, right? Mm-hmm. I think that by helping early, like it increases their awareness. Like, hey, you have to be locked in early, because you have to be shading. You have to be on the strong side block, because if you're not, then our defense is just going to fall off a cliff. So I think this team needs that level of engagement early on before. So I think I worry or wonder about if if they're just saying, all right, we're going to stay home and we'll provide the weak side help, when necessary. I do wonder or worry about like if we're just going to see a bunch of late helps because their engagement level to start the possession is lower, if that makes sense. So I'm technically
it's tough. It's tough. I think they're in a tough spot with it, to be honest. Like I think that's my biggest concern coming out of game one was like just the inability to contain the advantage creation from Minnesota. I thought Minnesota created advantage. Like again, I think the Lakers' initial help was good, but then out of that they were terrible, which they can be better, and I think they will be better in game two. But like it's still, I don't know.
And then speed and physicality were also the other two. Or quickness, not even just pure speed. I'm not talking about north-south. I mean, some of it is north-south running, especially in transition. But I'm thinking more so just the quickness in which they run their plays, the quickness in terms of moving defensively, in terms of closing out. There was a, I don't want to say urgency. Urgency feels too strong, but there was just a lack of, come on, keep the chain moving, keep it moving. That just in a way that Minnesota was like, nope, we're gone, we're going. That was to me. So that's not even so much a tactical thing to me, just more so I guess pace, quickness, and just overall speed. I mean, Minnesota's going to have the athleticism advantage, but that doesn't mean that the Lakers have to. I mean, the Lakers, they can be a little methodical. They can be a little methodical, especially offensively, but there is an advantage they can gain if they just play a little bit quicker, if they try to, especially offensively, if they try to get to certain gaps a little bit quicker, because then that just puts Minnesota in a position where they have to make decisions a little quicker, and they can't like, all right, if I'm being Rudy right now, all right, I got him, all right, now I'm about to go close out on Rui or DFS. No, just a little bit more speed. To your point about getting, driving deeper into the paint, do that a little bit quicker and go a little further in, and then that could be the difference between a contested three versus 5 feet of distance between the catch and shooter and the big man, or Rudy, Nas, whoever it is, but usually Rudy because they have Nas and Julius switching quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I think one thing that you can't simulate in your practice leading up to playing this team that clearly the Lakers were not able to simulate was just their length. And there was little things like there was the one play, I forget if it was the third or fourth quarter, but I almost want to say fourth, but Rui is in the left corner. The ball gets swung to him. Nas closes out and blocks him. I think it was actually late third, but it like on paper, if you freeze it right where like Nas is and where Rui is, you're looking like he's about to get like a wide open corner three, but their ability to cover ground defensively and just the length and the athleticism at contesting shots. Like there were several threes that initially looked like open threes for the Lakers that the Wolves either blocked or altered or had a good contest on from covering a lot of ground. There were several times the ball was deflected or stolen from passes that on again, depending on where you freeze the film, it looks like, oh, I can see why this player thinks this is the right pass, and it is the right pass, except all of a sudden Jaden McDaniels sticks his arm up. He's got a 7'1" wingspan and he's deflecting it or stealing it. So I think it kind of like LeBron talked about this after the game, that maybe it just took them like a game to kind of adjust to Minnesota and understand it. And they have to be more intentional, I think, with their spacing. I thought the screening wasn't great. I think that's like a big thing just overall is if they can ramp up the intensity, play more physically, hit back a little bit more, like that should alone kind of put them in a better headspace, because I thought Minnesota kind of punked them at times. But then if we're talking about, well, even with Ant, I think a thing is like you don't have to not help at all. I think it's more so a step closer to a shooter, right? Like on the initial drive. And I just think in terms of like the positioning, they were a little bit too tilted towards helping on Ant, especially one pass away. And that's where you saw some of the mistakes come of like, they don't have the same speed and athleticism as Minnesota. So that covering that like 10, 12 feet to close out, I think was a bit harder for them than it is for Minnesota. So I think they clean up some of the helping stuff. They play harder. They play with more intensity. They execute better. They mismatch hunt a little bit more strategically and effectively. I think we're talking about a much closer game, and then it comes down to shot making and execution and turnovers and transition and all that stuff. But like, I think if they can clean some of this stuff up, they will have a much better result in game 2.
No, I mean, and that's, again, I think I said this early. I think we both, I said this early. Just there's so much that could have gone better, or that should have gone better for the Lakers. So if they clean up, I don't even look at it as like they have to clean up 5, 6 different. I mean, if they could, it'd be nice for them. But if they just clean up maybe 1 to 2 things, I mean, yes, this was a 18-point game, 18-point win for Minnesota, but I mean,
22.
20. Oh, bad math. 117, yeah, bad math.
I mean, still basically the same thing.
Yeah, if you're able to just that's take away 4 threes, we're talking about 10, and if you get back in transition, or if you convert a couple layups, I mean,
Jaxson missed a couple lobs.
Yeah, it's like
Vando
sometimes
missed a layup.
Sometimes they're within the actual execution pieces, like there are things they need to clean up, but sometimes the actual margin makes the game, like, it did look bad. I'm not going to take that away, but some of the things that looked bad were so loud, like just in terms of transition, offensive rebound, like some of them were just so loud. I feel like it makes the game feel worse than what it was, at least in my view, rather than, oh, okay, if you guys just, like, sometimes it comes down to intensity and ferocity, to a word that you use, and urgency, because that alone can be the difference between not making or missing layups, but maybe creating the openings or maintaining the openings and advantages that make the layups a little easier, or intentionality in terms of execution, or the intensity in which you're closing out or helping. So that's why I'm not too concerned. Now, if they put on another performance like that, or if I'm seeing the similar issues arise in game 2, then it's like, okay, so maybe they're not getting it, and that to me would be more of an issue rather than the actual execution. They're not seeing these issues at hand. But I feel like you rewatched game 1, you've had a couple of days to sit on it. I do feel like they'll be able to pinpoint, oh yeah, we could have been better in all these areas that we've talked about.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for being the first 4-time guest. We will be making it 5 soon with a special Lakers beat writer roundtable that I promise will be going off the rails this weekend. We'll be recording in between game 3 and 4 in Minnesota. So we'll be posting a prompt for people to send in questions. Then we'll be picking the best ones, and maybe some beat superlatives to let people know, a little peek behind the curtain. Not too much. We got to keep some things behind closed doors. But Khobi, thank you again so much for your time. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here, other than at Khobi Price on X and your weekly show with Bleacher Report?
Yeah, you've mentioned it, so I'll plug it. I do have the Lakers Insider weekly show with Bleacher Report. We'll have the next episode tomorrow, 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific, every Tuesday at that time. And then in the morning, for the playoffs, I'm doing a 3 things kind of preview for the next game. So before game 1, I had a 3 things I'm looking for game 1. It was Anthony Edwards. It's funny how the Lakers defend Anthony Edwards in the help, small ball versus the Minnesota's bigger lineups, and then the Luka matchup defensively, which I figured would be Jaden McDaniels, which it turned into being. So I'll have another one for game 2 that'll go live tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, right? Yeah, Tuesday morning, early in the morning. So you can read it before game 2 kicks off later in the night.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll be seeing you in like less than an hour at Lakers practice, and maybe we'll have some updates on some of the strategic stuff. But appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Catch you later. Appreciate you.
All right. We are here with Jon Krawczynski, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Minnesota Timberwolves. My esteemed colleague, I would argue one of the best beat writers in America, not just basketball, but any sport. Jon, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Jovan. This is an honor, just getting the Buha, kicking it off. Like, I mean, now I know I'm in the big time here with the LA media, all of this stuff. And so I'm excited to break it down with you here. So thanks for having me.
Welcome to the block. I'm glad you are here. So I want to start with game one. And I think for many Laker fans, it was a surprising result. The Lakers entered this relatively heavy favorites, I would say, considering the fact that they only won one more game than the Wolves. And from a statistical perspective, you could argue that the Wolves were the more impressive team in the regular season, top 10 on both sides of the ball, better point differential, better net rating, etc. But despite that, LA, with post Luka trade and the run that they went on to earn the number 3 seed, and just the way that they have looked against OKC and some of these other teams recently, entered the series as the favorites. But despite that, they lost by 22 points at home in a decisive game one win for the Wolves. So what was your top line takeaway from game one? Was there anything that stood out or surprised you?
Yeah, I would say that the thing that I wouldn't say surprised, but was interesting to me was everyone I knew, like even the biggest Laker backers would say that one of the concerns that you go into this series with the Lakers is the small front court if Jaxson Hayes is not going to be effective. And when I looked at the series as it started, even when the Lakers were going to go small, I thought, you know what? Like, Rui's still a big dude. LeBron's a big dude. Luka, they have size, even if it's not height. And so I thought that the Lakers might have a little bit better time sort of neutralizing what the Wolves want to do from a size perspective. But when I saw it in person and I saw the matchup and how it was playing out, just the Wolves were so much bigger. And I just saw that as pretty glaring to me to see it, like the matchup 1-1, Jaden McDaniels getting wherever he wanted and rising up over guys. Rudy didn't play a huge part, but was still, I think, a presence defensively for the Timberwolves. And Julius Randle had a couple of bully ball moments against the Lakers front court. And so, obviously, we can get to the shooting and the things that went well for the Wolves that way. But I just thought that, if you're looking at things that are in the Wolves' favor throughout this series, that's not going away. And so I was really sort of startled almost by how much bigger and stronger the Wolves looked than the Lakers in the front court.
They won a lot of the one-on-one physical matchups. And I think even looking at it going into the series, I would say if Jaden McDaniels and Rui Hachimura or Dorian Finney-Smith are battling for a rebound, I know Jaden's taller than both of them, but Rui's got at least 20 pounds, if not a little bit more on him. And Dorian Finney-Smith has been transitioning more toward playing the 4, playing the 5 in Brooklyn, and been pretty successful at that and playing against bigger guys. And like he's been the key to their small ball looks. And I thought they would hold their own better, and they didn't. And so seeing like him push those two in particular around at times, to say nothing of what Rudy and Julius and Naz were doing, it did stand out just from like I talked about this on my live stream after the game. It was just like, strip away the jerseys, the names, and like just look at just like the body language and the physicality, and like just looking at each team kind of matched up, like which team looks more imposing. It's clearly the Wolves. And I think that was something that, as you said, like the Lakers almost, their small ball look isn't really small ball. I call it centerless ball, because they got 4 power forward size guys out there, like LeBron, Rui, Dorian, and Luka. If you're looking at like their natural defensive positions, I would argue they're all power forwards defensively. So while they don't have a center that can match up with say, Rudy, they still got 4 guys out there between 6'7" and 6'9", all like 220 plus. And they got some size. But against the Wolves, it's like their front court is ginormous. They bring in Naz. They also played with a certain level of ferocity and just intensity that the Lakers did not match. And I think that's the biggest thing going into game 2. But from the Wolves' perspective, how did they assess game 1? And what are they looking at in terms of game 2 adjustments? Because obviously when a team wins in game 1, you tend to stick with your game plan, and it's like continue doing that until they stop it. But were there things that the Wolves felt like they could have done better that they're looking to do in game 2? Or like, how are they kind of viewing the series after going up 1-0?
Yeah, so while most of the basketball world was this is a Lakers series, and look, I want to say understandably so. When you go into a series and you're facing Luka and LeBron, like the default setting should be that you're probably going to be underdogs and you're probably going to be doubted, and so I don't blame most people for looking that way. But I will tell you that the Wolves themselves internally came into this series incredibly confident with how they matched up. And so they were not surprised at all by the outcome on Saturday night. But also, I think there is an even greater sort of optimism from them because, yes, they had their way in game 1, but they by no means played a perfect game. Julius Randle had 7 turnovers. Rudy Gobert, who has been so involved offensively over the last 6 weeks, really didn't get many shots, didn't get many of those lob passes from Julius. Ant didn't shoot well. He shot 4 of 9 from 3, but he took 22 shots for his 22 points. So he was not efficient and didn't get to the line at all. And he normally gets to the line a lot. And so there were a bunch of real tangible things that they look at that could be better for them going into game 2. And so that sort of, in their eyes, mitigates the concern of, well, is Jaden McDaniels going to be 11 for 13 again? Is Nas going to go 6 for 9 from 3? Probably not. And so, yeah, like they view it, and I view it personally as less of a crazy outlier performance that led to the game 1 win than, yes, they got a really kind of unexpected offensive contribution from Jaden McDaniels, but they have many other levers to pull and to be more effective at going into game 2 and game 3 and as long as the series goes, that they still believe that they're confident that they can keep winning games, even if those kinds of performances from Nas and Jaden, don't happen in game 2.
You mentioned Jaden. He was my X factor going into this series. I did a breakdown on The Athletic and also on my podcast looking at one Wolves X factor, and in both instances I referenced Jaden. I also had an honorable mention to Nas, and that they combined for 48 points in game 1. But I will also say, like, that was part of the Lakers' defensive game plan, was if you are going to cheat off of one of the Wolves supporting cast catch and shoot guys, it is going to be Jaden. Just from, like, I think the Wolves final quarter run of the season, I think, has kind of flown under the radar of just how good they have been. And in looking at the post All-Star break numbers and just looking at the way that they had been playing and watching some film on it, it was clear, like, there's not many guys you can help off of in this rotation. Like, Dante is a good shooter. Mike Conley is a good shooter. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a good shooter. We know about Ant and leading the league in 3-point makes. I think like Julius and Jaden are the two guys I look at that they combine for 7 threes. You probably can't rely on that every single game. But at the same time, if you're going to be leaving Jaden McDaniels wide open in the corner, and I thought the most impressive part of his game was attacking closeouts and either getting to the rim and finishing a couple times, or he had the little pull-up midi a couple times as well in the paint, just like 8-10 footers uncontested. So he I thought did a really good job of exploiting how the Lakers were guarding him. And again, not just the making the threes, but also it's like, if you're giving me this much space, I'm going to drive. And as he said after the game, when Jaxson Hayes is off the floor, I'm the tallest guy. I'm taller than any other Laker. So like, I could just rise up or get to the rim or whatever. And like, I'm not really concerned with their level of rim protection. So you wrote a great story after game 1 about Jaden and his nonchalant attitude. You kind of compared it more to Kawhi Leonard than Ant Edwards. But with him and just his role in this series, obviously he's the primary defender on Luka. And I thought he held up better. Luka got his 37, but like just that one-on-one matchup, I thought, like, a lot of it was switching and having other guys switched on to Luka and him attacking them. But like, I think Jaden held up a little bit better than he did in the conference finals. but just his role overall, like how do you view him in terms of being an X factor in this series? And like the thing I wrote that I stand by is if the Wolves win this series, I think he's going to be playing a big part in that. And like that's going to be one of the headlines is Jaden McDaniels is better than people realize. And he was a swing factor for Minnesota potentially winning this.
Yeah, I do. I think he's hugely important for the Wolves in this series because he can be streaky from an offensive standpoint, but when he is hitting shots and reliable and not just the threes, but attacking the closeouts and getting that pull up midi in the lane, I'm sure that a lot of Lakers fans are being like, how could he hit that? Come on. But that's what he does. That's part of his game. And so when he is knocking down those shots and producing offensively, they go from a good team to a potentially excellent team because he is used to, and the Wolves are used to seeing looks from opposing defenses where their worst defender is on Jaden McDaniels. Because when you ask Jaden to just be a 3-and-D guy, sit in the corner, catch and shoot, and then play defense, that's not really how you maximize Jaden McDaniels. And to your point, Jovan, when he is at his best and what he's fully capable of doing is he was 3 for 3 from 3. He could have taken 6 or 7 threes. He did not. Like he caught on the perimeter and he drove to the lane and he rose up over smaller defenders for good, clean looks that he can get almost whenever he wants. And so, his ability to take advantage of whether it's Luka, whether it's Reeves, whoever it is, like that's switching out onto him, that they're trying to hide a defender on him. That's going to be a long night if he is in rhythm and catching. And the other thing about his offensive contribution is he's one of the best movers without the ball, with his overall cutting and everything like that. The Wolves offense can get kind of stagnant sometimes with Ant and Julius ISOs. And so they rely on Jaden McDaniels to kind of get the ball moving, but also getting the bodies moving to get the offense sort of harder to deal with. And it was a near perfect game from Jaden in game one offensively. And you're right, defensively, the approach, I believe, Jovan, with Luka for the Wolves is almost identical to the approach that they take with Nikola Jokic. When they play the Nuggets, and they have dominated the Nuggets, their key is, okay, Jokic, you might score 30, you might score 40, you might score 60. But what we're not going to do is allow you to kick out to wide open Michael Porter Jr., to wide open Jamal Murray, and to get them going and get their rhythm going. And Luka had 1 assist in game one. And I think, that was partly Jaden and just really the whole coverage designed to, if Luka goes off for his, we are not going to let LeBron get in a rhythm. You're not going to let Austin Reeves get in a rhythm. You can't let, Gabe Vincent get going, or Rui, get going from outside, because that's how the avalanche comes down the mountain on you if you're defending the Lakers. And so I think it was really successful for them in game one to just really kind of dig in on the supporting cast. Luka had 37. He had a great game, but it wasn't nearly enough when you had as balanced offensive output that the Wolves were able to go, thanks to Jaden McDaniels scoring.
Was there a shift, in your opinion, compared to the conference finals? Because I didn't watch. I mean, I watched the full conference finals last year, but then went back to Synergy and watched some film on it entering this series. And it felt like McDaniels did a better job fighting over screens. Like with Rudy, they did switch a little bit. It was mainly switching with Nas and with Julius. But with Rudy, obviously, he's going to be in a high drop, and they're going to try to contain Luka there and not let him penetrate. But I thought McDaniels did a really good job of trailing from behind, also fighting over screens and like just shrinking the floor a bit on him. Luka still got his 37, but to your point, 1 assist to 5 turnovers. And that to flip it on the other side, Ant only has 22, but he has 9 assists to 1 turnover. And that 1 turnover came a minute 15 into the game when the Lakers kind of blitzed him and were pressuring him. He throws the ball out of bounds. From that point on, 9 assists, 0 turnovers, rest of the game. So as I look toward like what the Lakers can can try to do against Ant to slow down the Wolves offense. I almost look at the way that Minnesota guards the Lakers, and it's not the same personnel on both sides, but I just kind of wonder if they should try to play him more one-on-one and try to just live with, okay, if Ant drops 30 or 40 or even 50, okay, he crossed up Rui, like you're going to see probably more of that. But I think the problem was he got the 22. I think he got fouled several times in the paint. I thought at least a couple of the times were like non-calls that you mentioned him not getting the free throw line. Like I think he probably should have gotten at least a few free throws. But like, so I think even the 8 for 22 is a little deceptive. Of it was probably closer to 8 for 20, 8 for 19, based on what I felt just watching the game or rewatching it. So I guess I kind of led you down two separate questions here of like, how did you feel like they shifted their approach toward Luka? And also, do you think there's anything the Lakers can try to take from that success of just letting Luka get his, and we're going to try to shut down everybody else, and them trying to use that, I guess, against Ant?
Yeah, I think like the difference in the Western Conference Finals, Jaden said afterward that he thinks in the Western Conference Finals he got caught on Luka's hip just too much, and that was put him at a really disadvantageous position, even with his length, with his arms. Luka is just so good at shielding, at using angles and leverage. He just never was bothered by Jaden. But the other part that made it so difficult to guard Luka is the lob threat that he had with Gafford and Lively was just too much for the Timberwolves to have to focus on, trying to make things difficult on Luka to limit his shooting and get a hand in his face, but then also not just completely commit to him, which opened things wide open for Gafford, Lively, Derek Jones Jr. Just the Mavs had so many options for Luka, going to the rim, getting into the air and throwing down lobs, that it was just, there was no good option for the Wolves there. And the Lakers don't appear to have that same dynamic element to them, or at least they didn't in game one. And that was, I think it made it a lot easier for them to just focus on, limiting Luka's passing options and go that way. And then when you kind of transition that over to Ant, I do wonder if an approach of sort of mano a mano and it is maybe the way to go with him, because one thing that he talked about, one thing that the Timberwolves talked a lot about leading into this series was they did not want this to be Ant versus Luka or Ant versus LeBron. And because they have seen times this season where Ant will want to, there was one game out in Golden State where he just wanted to beat Steph on his home floor and tried to outshoot him down the stretch. It didn't work out. And so they don't want Ant to get into a gunslinging, shootout at the OK Corral with the two stars and just be like, this is my team, this is my league, I'm taking this over. They are relying on Ant to be ultra mature, to get his teammates involved, and to fight the urge to just take over. And when the Lakers load up on him the way that they do, it makes it easier for him to make that decision. And so I wonder if they do single cover him, if they do just go straight up with him, if that wouldn't maybe lure him into kind of more of a, all right, I'm going to take this over. Now you run the risk of him going 7 for 11 from 3 and just going nuclear, and doing it that way. But the Wolves believe, and Chris Finch has said this, that they are at their best when both Ant and Randall are in the running for triple doubles and not necessarily in the 30 to 35 points a game kind of category. So it'll be interesting to see what JJ does from a defensive standpoint that way, because I worry about the Lakers and their ability to defend on the perimeter regardless. And so what they do with Anthony Edwards to try and neutralize that is going to be, I think, a big factor in what happens in game 2.
It wasn't just Ant. I thought like Mike Conley had a couple of nice drives to the rim.
Nas Reed can do it out there. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Julius, obviously Jaden, as we mentioned earlier. I'm curious for your thoughts on this, because I think one of the pivot points in this series, in my opinion, is going to be LeBron's ability to beat Minnesota's bigs off the dribble. And I thought he struggled with that in game one. That there was that one sequence in the second quarter as Minnesota was going on that big run to regain the lead and then stretch it out to double digits, that he gets blocked on consecutive possessions by Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid. I thought that they did a really good job of just staying in front of him, switching on to him, and just corralling his drives. And I think one thing for the Lakers that they have to seriously consider, and they didn't do this as much as I thought they would, is trying to target Mike Conley. Like I thought he was the guy that, if you look at the 8 Wolves primary rotation guys at 6'1", he's the guy that, like, the Lakers are an elite mismatch hunting team that has been their bread and butter, especially in fourth quarters. And with Luka, LeBron, and Austin, you have 3 options to target whoever's the weakest defender on the floor. And at Mike Conley, as a guy in his late 30s and 6'1", like, that is going to be a mismatch against any of those 3 in an isolation situation. But I think the Lakers didn't target it enough. And I also think the Wolves, there was a lot of show and recover with Mike Conley. And like, they were being diligent about not switching him onto certain guys. So you'd see if it was a Dante and a Na, okay, they switch that. Or an Ant and a Na, okay, they switch that. If it's Mike Conley, okay, we're going to show quickly, then he's going to recover back to his man. And they did a really good job within that kind of cat and mouse game of preventing him from switching as often as the Lakers would have liked, and him being kind of on an island there. So when looking at what the Lakers could try to do offensively to get a LeBron going, to get an Austin going, I think it's more targeting Minnesota's smaller guys, and that being more of the entry point into their defense rather than the bigger guys. As the Lakers reevaluate their offensive approach, I would try to target the smalls, and I'm not saying it's going to work, and Minnesota could counter that. But if they start to double, that's when you get them in rotation, and that's when you create an advantage, because I thought LA just did a poor job of drawing doubles in general, and also just creating advantages against Minnesota's length and size, and getting them in rotation. So in terms of targeting some of the smaller guys within their rotation, like, what do you think of that approach, and how do you think Minnesota would try to counter that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a little surprised that there wasn't more of that in game one, for sure. I mean, one of my big concerns for the Timberwolves coming into this series was Mike Conley is so important to what they do, especially offensively, as an organizer, as a quarterback of the offense, as a decision maker. They lean on him a lot, but I was trying to figure out what the defensive matchup was for him because of the Lakers' size. I thought that maybe he could stick with Reeves, just in terms of he's a good chase guy through screens and getting through that. But I still was worried about what happens after that. And the Lakers did not take advantage of that. I do think that part of it seemed like to me that neither LeBron nor Reeves were in any kind of a rhythm. And maybe, the week off, maybe it actually worked against them a little bit in that regard, and they'll feel a little bit more kind of locked in for game 2. And so maybe some of those Reeves little floaters and things that didn't fall in game 1 will go, and that will help. But I do think that one of the things that I liked about the Timberwolves in this Lakers matchup is that Chris Finch has so many options. So if the Lakers do start picking on Mike Conley, if they do start exploiting that, he can take Mike Conley out, and he can go, DiVincenzo is smaller, but he's still a fighter. Like, he's a physical player that can have a better chance of standing up to some of the size that the Lakers can present, and he's a really good defender. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is an incredibly quick, savvy guy who can navigate screens as well as any player in the league from a defensive standpoint. And so there are counters that Chris Finch can go to. You can use Ant as more of a primary defender type, like if you want to. So he has options to approach it. But I do think that it would be wise for the Lakers to try and play Conley off the floor if they can, because he just is their adult in the room. He's the metronome for everything that they do offensively. And if he's not out there, they lose one of their smartest, most reliable players, and that potentially could weaken the Timberwolves going forward. So I would think that the Wolves are preparing for LeBron and Luka in particular to hunt matchups much better than they did in game one. But I think that they also feel like they have counters to that if it does happen, and they'll be ready for it.
One other pivot point before we wrap with just what we're looking forward to with the rest of the series was I think a big thing with the Wolves playing a lot of drop coverage and they're more of like a hedging and blitzing team, not a switch heavy team. I think they ranked in the regular season like 27th in switching. So they like to play more coverages against pick and rolls, but they switched a lot in game one and they held up fairly well in those switches. So I think that was a win for the Wolves just in terms of the tactical battle. But if it gets to a point where the Lakers are able to target some of the smaller guys or even, Rudy, let's just say, like, I thought Luka had some success against him. I thought he held up well against Austin and LeBron, but like maybe Luka, they just spam that to the point where they're like, okay, we want to go a little bit smaller, but with Nas or whatever. If the Wolves at some point are forced into downsizing, like how do you feel they would fare in that instance? And are they comfortable with because I was wondering, especially with looking at how the Lakers were going to play and close things, like if at some point that we would see a lineup of like Nas or Julius as like the lone big, and then something like Jaden, Ant, Na, and Dante. So you got a bunch of switchable defensive wings and one big, and that can kind of match up with the Lakers like small ball look where they're just spacing you out with all 5 shooters and running pick and roll or mismatch hunting. And in that case, you can kind of just switch across like everybody. But I think if the Wolves can stay big, that gives them the advantage of they can protect the rim, they can own the glass, and they just have a certain like physical element to their lineups. So in terms of like later down the road in the series, do you see them ever going to that type of lineup? And if they do, how do you think that would fare against the Lakers' smaller look?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think they would do it, but only out of necessity. They want to stay big. Like they want to be the team that dictates the rules of engagement and uses that physicality and that size to their advantage because that's their real identity and that's them playing to their biggest strengths. So in a perfect world, they are able to do that and not get hurt by the Lakers spreading them out and knocking down shots and doing it that way. That said, they have played a lot of lineups this season where they are smaller in preparation for the playoffs. One of the things that they were concerned about last season, and one of the things, outside of the financial ramifications of making the Karl Anthony Towns trade, was they thought that they weren't quite flexible enough to match up opponent to opponent in a long playoff run. They wanted to be a little more versatile. And so when you bring in Julius and Dante, for Cat, when you have Nas Reed available, when you go Jaden at the 4, sometimes they have that ability and that comfortability to put those lineups out there, especially Jovan, because now what we had not seen prior to this season, that we have seen a lot of this season, is Jaden McDaniels as a rebounder. Prior to this season, he was like a 3 rebound a game guy, maybe. And even as tall and as long as he was, he just did not crash the glass at all on either end. But this season, he has really amped up his rebounding, and he's regularly 8, 9, sometimes 10, 11 rebounds in a game. And so that would be my big concern for the Wolves if they go small, is would they give up a ton of offensive rebounds? In that kind of a situation, you give the Lakers chance after chance. So if they do go small like that, Jaden would have to just take on more of the rebounding responsibilities, and he has shown to be capable of that. But the other part about it is if they do decide to go small, I do think that it turns from we are going to hold the Lakers to 100 or under as the strategy to we're just going to outscore them. Like, if they go small, our guys are skilled enough offensively to go at the Lakers defenders. Without Jaxson Hayes at the rim, there is no one that they're afraid of. And so maybe, the Lakers could put Vanderbilt out there and kind of muck things up, but then they're not worried about him offensively. So I think that the Wolves, if they went small, would feel okay with it, and they would be all right in more of a bucket for bucket type of an approach versus when they are bigger, it's we're going to get stops, and that's what's going to fuel the separation here.
Final one before we wrap up. What are you looking most forward to in game 2 and the rest of the series? Is there a tactical thing, an adjustment on either side, something we just talked about, but it could be whatever the rest of the series?
Yeah, my stuff, Jovan. I'm more of a vibes guy. Like I write Hallmark cards.
Big vibes
and
guy.
So like what I want to see with the Timberwolves is when they have been at their worst is generally when good things happen to them and everyone's gassing them up. And I don't think that's happened after game 1 necessarily. I think more of the talk has been about, what's going on with the Lakers and all of that stuff. But this team does not usually handle success very well. And so I think back to the Denver series where they're up 2-0 and then they lose the next 3 games because they were feeling themselves and thought that this was going to be easy. Or, they go into the Dallas series after beating Denver in game 7. Oh, we got this. And then, no, you don't got this. And so everything went so well for them in game 1. They felt great about it. I think that they did sort of open some eyes in just kind of the coverage of this series nationally about what they are capable of doing. And so their ability to sort of compartmentalize that and move on from it and keep building, I think is going to be interesting to me. It's entirely possible. I would not be shocked if they come out in game 2 and they're kind of a little flat. They're not as intense as they were in game 1. And that opens the door for the Lakers to really just kind of take it to them and get some confidence back. But how they approach, especially like the first half of game 2, to me is going to be important for them. If they can bring the same intensity and the energy and the focus and the chip on their shoulder, then I really like them. And I think this is a good chance. But if they kind of get a little fat and happy with it, I mean, Luka and LeBron will shove it right down their throat and they'll go back to Minnesota 1-1 and then you got a dogfight. So that's what I'm watching the most in at the start of game 2.
Jon, you are the best doing it right now. Thank you so much for your time. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
We have a lot of great coverage at The Athletic. You've done great with this series and reacting to game 1 and like looking ahead to game 2. And then I have the Jon Krawczynski Show podcast is on the Talk North radio or sports network that we go once a week. We're not prolific like you are, Jovan. But we do once a week Wolves Talk and just sit down and really break things down. That'll be coming a little bit later this week, I think, going into game 3. So if people want to check out the Wolves side of things, Jon Krawczynski Show, I think will go on Thursday ahead of the game 3 on Friday.
I will link it in the show notes below. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back live after game 2. I will talk to you then.